especially for verbal reasoning. Since I feel like a lot of you guys, and it's not expected to you're not expected to finish the entire 44 questions in 22 minutes. No, we'll go through the entire exam, question by question. But I'm just saying for the real thing, realistically, you're not going to have a good 30 to 40 seconds on each question, on the day of the exam. So is there a time limit?
Yes, but
Uh,
there is a time limit. That's a problem. So, um, shall we, as if you are doing it, let them answer. I think people will have,
yeah.
and then you just say. I mean, I know it's a bit difficult, but we wanted to
If
try this.
you can send me the exam without the answers, I can just share my screen. No?
That will be better, isn't it? So, do you wanted to then open this and then share the answers? Will that work out then?
Yeah, let me have a go at doing that.
See how it. And probably next time, hopefully we'll get a better software to for this to work out. Sincere apologies.
Yeah, that's fine.
So do you want to screen share? Open the.
Yeah, I can just share my screen.
Yeah, that will be better then. People can post, ask people to post that. But the problem is, this will end in 60 minutes. Again, that's a problem.
Um, can I not just make another one and just skip to like a new account or something? Oh, okay. Can you guys see this? Okay.
You can increase the. Yes. Hmm.
Okay, yeah. So obviously in the real thing, you're not going to kind of go through it question by question, especially since certain questions will be significantly harder than others. So usually what that would look like is what I did and what worked for me was I'd break it down into three different run-throughs. So for today's purposes, we're going to go through it question by question. But in terms of exam like technique, what I would do is usually maybe in the first like 10-ish minutes. I'd expect to answer maybe six or seven passages, and I'd have seen the other four or five that I haven't answered. And of those four or five, I'd tell myself, like, realistically, I've got another 10 minutes left. And so these are the harder passages, and most people aren't going to get these either way. And the whole point is like, for me to get 700 or 800, if you look at the mark distribution for verbal reasoning, you don't need to get that much of a high score to get a really good score in verbal reasoning. Whereas for decision making and QR, most people do tend to do better in terms of a raw score there. So for you to like get 700, 800 there, you're going to need a lot more correct. So what I'd kind of think about is when you are going through verbal reasoning, you don't need to get like 80% of the questions right or 90%. You only need maybe 50, 60, or even 70 to get like a ridiculously high score. So that was kind of my rationale as to, like how you should go through this. So for that purpose, what I did was break it down into three run-throughs. In my first run-through, I'd only do questions that I liked. So say for example, it's like a true false can't tell question, and I can see a lot of numbers and I can see a lot of proper nouns. And I know, like, realistically, if I was to attempt this question, it would take me the 2 minutes. Then I'd do it then. Whereas if I saw a question that was slightly harder, so if it was a reading comprehension question, that might have taken me an extra minute altogether for the entire passage, I'd do in my second run through. And by the end of that, I would be left with maybe two or three passages. So that's 8 or 12 questions that I just wouldn't get to do. So I'd just spam C for those. And the whole point behind that is realistically, if you kind of go into it with the mentality that you're not going to finish, you're going to feel a lot more confident once you finish that first verbal reasoning section. And the whole point is like you want to do really well on decision making and QR because it's not as time limited. And at least for me, like if I could consistently get 750, then that was great. Instead of like one day getting 850, where I got really lucky and I was able to do a lot of questions, and the next day I got like 450 when all the questions were really hard and I couldn't do as many. But yeah, um, I think it's been enough time here. So do you guys want to kind of tell me what the answers are? And you can just type it in the chat. Okay, yeah. So, someone said false. I think the first one is false because it says uh, how does it say this? So the one exception to the diploma route is for applicants holding an advanced theory certificate. So um, it either means you can do the diploma or the advanced theory certificate, and it's not like you need to do both. It's either you do this route or the other route. What about question number two? So um, could a lot more people type? I think it's just a few of you guys typing. It's not the end of the world if you get it wrong in here. Yeah, so a lot of people are saying can't tell. So for true false can't tell questions, the main difficulty comes, yeah, so the answer is can't tell. But in terms of questions like this, generally what I struggled with the most was if I got a question like this, I could tell when it was true, and I could also t kind of tell when it wasn't true. The main difficulty came for me at least was when I was stuck between choosing is it false or is it can't tell. And the way I thought about it was I kind of just ignored can't tell. So what I would do is like read the question, pick out keywords, and then go through the passage. And then let's say like the part that I need to look at is here, right? I'd just think to myself, is it explicitly said or is it contradicted? If it isn't, then I'd move on to later. So try and find another point in the passage where it's either explicitly said or contradicted. If I can't kind of determine is it true or false based off that, then that's when I think, oh, it could be can't tell. Because I feel like if you have the option of can't tell available to you as soon as you do the question, it's quite hard to kind of think of it all together. So I just kind of removed that from my head, and I thought, let's just assume it's either true or false. If I genuinely can't see where it's contradicted or supported, then in that case, let me think, oh, is it can't tell? Does it go beyond the scope of the passage? Does it kind of introduce new information that hasn't been talked about here? Or does it make like a false assumption that hasn't been stated here? So that was the whole kind of step-by-step approach I used. I think you guys will be sent answers for the mock after. Okay, so question three, is the diploma the highest qualification that can be taken? Yeah, it seems basically everyone said true, and that is the right answer. But yeah, so generally, what you kind of want to do is do those passages. So if you look at this, realistically, it's a quite short passage. The questions are true, false, can't tell, and you've got like P1, P2, and a lot of like proper nouns that you can keyword search for. Whereas something like this, realistically, if you were to do it, they expect you to go through the exam in basically 30 seconds per question. If you were to do something like this, it's going to be ridiculously hard um, to kind of. Sorry, the last line said there was an exception. I think what they're talking about there is um, like you can either do like diploma is the highest thing, but you can go through it in different orders. So it's not okay, yeah. But the whole point is if you see something like this realistically, if you're gonna go through in your first run through, it's gonna take you ages to go through. So there's not a lot of numbers. It hasn't even been broken down into paragraphs. So for me to kind of go through this, pick out keywords and search through it is gonna take me a lot of time. So what I would think to myself if I saw this is I'm definitely gonna skip it now. It's a really hard question. If the other questions are going to be ridiculously hard as well, then maybe I'd do this in my second run through. But if the other questions are easy, I'd probably save this to the end. So in the last minute, I'm just guessing, making educated guesses, like based off what I saw on Medify and MedEntry of similar questions like this. So obviously on the day of the exam, you shouldn't start off like if this is your second question, you shouldn't start off by doing something like this because it's going to take up a lot of your time and mess up with your kind of sense of timing. Because if you invest a good 4 minutes into this, you're going to feel like, oh no, I haven't done that much and I've lost a lot of time and that's going to put you off for the rest of the exam as well. But since we're going through it question by question, have a go at doing this as well. So just type it whenever, I guess, you've got an answer. This is quite a hard question, to be fair. So, if you guys also want to open this up and go through it at your own pace, because it's hard for me to kind of zoom in on the extract and still show the next couple questions. So I think I would just show the extract for you guys. And as you kind of go through it at your own pace, just have the answers ready for each extract. Yeah, so again, I feel like this question is really tough because I was kind of I'm still kind of stuck between A and C as well. Um, it's basically just the same thing. So again, don't be too worried. I think the correct answer for this is C. But there's no like key piece of evidence that tells you it's C. Um, I think it's just a poorly worded question, but yeah, it's all of these answer options are kind of basically the same thing. The whole point is these children today just asking a lot of questions over and over again, and there's a lot of reference to like a string of unanswerable questions, there's a lot of reference to repetition. I think that's why it is C and instead of A. But the thing is, realistically, like if you do a question like this on the actual UCAT, so let's say this is the first time you've seen this passage, right? Or you finish this and you've just pressed next and you see this. So firstly, there's no paragraphs. There's a lot of just text. There's not a lot of numbers or like proper nouns. And then you look at the question, right? The keywords that so my main method wasn't to kind of skim read the passage and then answer the questions because what I found was like realistically if I spent another 15 seconds at the start of each question skim reading it then in that 15 seconds like my brain isn't really that active. I would have like seen all the words but I wouldn't actually like understand what's going on. So what I kind of did was purely just read the question first, pick out keywords and just see if I can just match those keywords. And then from there, I'd pick out like, so I'll explain why this question's tough in a bit, but um, I'd pick out those keywords and I'd go through the extract and I'd be like, okay, so this keyword's not here, it's here. But the first paragraph was about this, second paragraph was about this. So in the second, third, and fourth questions, I'd kind of save a little bit of time because I'd create mental notes of the first paragraph, second, third, and fourth. So I could kind of refer back to it later. So what I mean by that is, let's say instead of this paragraph, instead of this extract, you go like a biography, right? And the biography is like it's got a paragraph at the start, a middle, and in the end. And as you're keyword searching, you kind of realize, okay, so the first paragraph is about his childhood, the second one is about his job, the third one is about his family life. Um, so once you create those mental notes in that first question, let's say the second question was about his job, right? You're going to pick out your keywords and you're instantly going to know where to look. So the whole point is if you're going to go through 44 questions in 22 minutes and you need to average 2 minutes per question, you can't kind of expect to average 30 seconds per question. It will look like 50 seconds and then 40 seconds, 30 seconds, 20 seconds. So just by default, the first question of a passage is going to take you guys a lot longer. But if you kind of, as you're keyword searching, if you're making mental notes, you're going to save a lot of time in the second, third, and fourth question. That hopefully should allow you to average 2 minutes over the entire passage. But again, these questions I just wouldn't do because um, all the keywords that I'm looking for. So one, it's not really keyword based. It's more like, do I understand what's going on? And then I have to answer the question, which is going to take me a lot of time to do in the exam. And secondly, the keywords for me to kind of like go through this with is, so all the keywords are in here. So A, B, C, and D. So if you compare it to something like this, right? So the question here, says everything I need to know. So if I just literally think, okay, so outside the country, P1, P2, license to practice. And from there, I'm just scanning for these keywords here. So it's quite quick. All I have is like one set of keywords to go through. Whereas if you have questions like this, right, you've got keywords and answer option A, B, C, and D. So you're going to have to, yeah, later. Yeah, you're going to have to kind of go through multiple sets of keywords and go through the paragraph multiple times to reach the right answer. So in this case, it was C, right? So on the day of the exam, you're going to pick out these keywords, go through it, realize it's wrong, B, and then realize it's wrong, and then do C. So usually these are the kind of questions that I would just spam C for or spam A for, and I wouldn't like care too much. Um, do you guys want to finish this set or do you want to move on? Because we have to kind of go through the other two subtests as well and it's already been kind of 40 minutes. But I'd rather go through the questions that realistically on the day of the exam, these are the questions that you should be doing and you should be getting right. So something like this instead of the one above. Is that okay? Yeah, so on the real thing, on average, you're going to see maybe 4 out of 11 true false can't tell, and on average, like 7 or 8 ish reading comprehension questions. But that doesn't mean you're skipping every reading comprehension question. Like if you look at sorry, so if you look at something like this, right? Oh, no, maybe not that, but something like this, right? So even though this is a reading comprehension question, you've got keywords up there that you can use to kind of search through the paragraph. Whereas this question up here, it's not, the keywords aren't in the stem. So you've got 4 unique sets of keywords. So on average, you're going to kind of get 4 true false can't tell questions. So those are going to have the keywords in the stem. And of these reading comprehension as well, usually you're going to get half where all the keywords are in here and you kind of have to comprehend everything and actually answer it. And the other half will be close, more similar to true false can't tell, where I guess the keywords up here, and all you need to do is just fill in the blank. So for this question, pick out the keywords and then pick out probably century as well, and you just scan and you can fill in the blank. But realistically, these harder ones where you've got multiple sets of keywords within the answer options, they're going to take a lot of time to do, and I just didn't do them on the real thing. But when I was kind of practicing, what I would focus on more for those questions is there an easier way to answering the question? So say for example, a lot of these styles of questions, one of those four questions will basically be like, oh, what does the author think? Or what was the author's opinion? And what I found was instead of me reading everything, if I just read it backwards, so read the bottom and then try infer what he thought, that usually gave me a good enough idea as to like what he's on about. Um, but yeah, that was a good question though. So, what do you guys think is the answer for this? So just type it in the chat whenever you're ready. Yeah, so it is false. And so step by step, what you do is you see this, you think, okay, there's a lot of numbers broken up into paragraphs, and it's true, false, can't tell. So realistically, if I was to do this set of four questions, then I could get it done in that 2 minutes that I'm going to allocate for it. If it was a little bit harder, then maybe do it for the second one through, where you're going to allocate yourself 3 minutes per set. So then the next thing I would do is pick out keywords, so world class, visual memories, non-players, and literally just go through try find the keywords, and then I saw here um, they're outstanding in remembering the position. So just this sentence is kind of all you need. So they're not better than the average person. So it is false. Yeah. Um, so question 8. Yeah. We'll kind of go a little faster, but again, it's basically the same sentence, right? So very good players, they have an encyclopedic knowledge of sequences of standard opening moves. Um, but yeah, it is true. So people think faster between 25 and 40. Yeah, again, if you just pick out the numbers and you see 25, 40, and then 16, 24, you can see that processing power is on maximum between those ages. And the last one, tournament players make most of their money from prizes. So just type it whenever you're ready. Yeah, again, so this is one of those trickier true false can't tell questions. Um, so I kind of talked about this earlier, so it's quite easy to tell when something's true or like straight away false, because it'll be like just said or contraindicated. But the kind of main difficulty is trying to determine is it can't tell or is it false. So so the statement is tournament players make most of their money from prizes. Um, again, so if you once you keyword search, this is where they're talking about money. If you just look for the word money, you'll find this kind of point in the extract. But the whole point is they do make prize money, but they also have to give lectures and demonstrations as well as playing to make a decent living. So this kind of leads you to assume that most their prize money isn't that good, and that would mean it's false. But again, um, I feel like this wouldn't come up in the real thing because there's a lot of ambiguity. Um, on the official UCAT, all these can't questions, like you'll know when it's can't because they'll maybe add like another assumption here, or they'll go outside the scope of the paragraph. It won't be this kind of hard where there's a bit of ambiguity between false and can't. But I think the answer is false. But can't makes a lot of sense as well. And the reason for that is it's the fact that they have to kind of give lectures and do other things to make a decent living. It's not that they're well off just from prize money. Um, but yeah, so we've kind of spent a lot of time on verbal reasoning. Do you guys want to finish verbal reasoning or do you want to go through decision making? Because there's going to be a lot more questions that we need to go through. Move on or okay, yeah. Uh, Actually, let's have a go at this question as well. So, this isn't true, false, can't tell, but it's one of those reading comprehension questions that realistically you should be doing in your first or second run through. Because, so if you see something like this, right, all they want you to do is just fill in the blanks. So, if you pick out the keywords from the stem and then go through this paragraph, it'll be quite quick to kind of just get the marks if you just keyword search. Because, having these keywords in your head is going to be a lot easier. Um, it's going to be more similar to true false can't tell than um, those harder reading comprehension questions. So it says a storm pulled away a lot of their people, and then it kind of just talks about erosion. So I would say A instead of B, but I do understand why you can think it's B as well. Um, Dunwich is described as England's Atlantis because um, could a lot more people type, please? Okay, yeah. So again, this was quite straightforward. So picking out the keyword Atlantis, and all you kind of had to do It's just scan for the keyword, and you can see Atlantis, and it was lost to the North Sea. So yeah, so these kinds of reading comprehension questions, when you see them, they're more similar to true false can't tell, because especially if you're just keyword searching, because all the kind of keywords you need are going to be in the stem rather than here. Um, but weren't they all 150 lost to the sea? As in, I think the whole point is they called this Atlantis because of the 150, this is the biggest one. So they want to kind of call it Atlantis. I don't really know why, but the whole point is, I think um, it's because it's been lost to the sea. Okay, so let's go through some decision making. So usually, for decision making, my advice is the exact opposite of verbal reasoning, because with verbal reasoning, what I kind of found over my preparation was, it wasn't that I got like, the kind of main difficulty was speed, because if I went a lot faster, then my accuracy would drop off, and if I went a lot slower, then I simply wouldn't be able to answer as many questions, and my score would just kind of plateau somewhere. Whereas, so the whole point behind that was let me just do the easiest questions first and the hardest ones later, so I can consistently get a good score. Whereas for decision making, if you practice it a lot, like every single day, and you kind of reflect on your questions, make new strategies, and explore why your strategies failed, it can be like it's probably the one subtest where you will see an increase as to like that's dependent on how much you practice. Because every single question here, other than logic puzzles, and even with logic puzzles, most of them, you will see on the day of your exam. Like you're going to see questions like this. You're definitely going to see those Venn diagrams and questions where you have to make comparisons like this. So if you've got a really quick and like efficient strategy for each of these question types, then you can kind of expect to get over 800, over 850 consistently on decision making. And the whole point is like that when I started, I think I started on like 600. And what I did was I just focused on one specific question type, and I spent like an entire day trying to think like, okay, so what's the quickest way to do going through this question? So use ChatGPT, look at how other people do this question. So go online, maybe go on TikTok or YouTube and see like, okay, so let me just search up syllogisms or yes, no questions and like watch a couple of videos, find strategies that work for you. And the thing is, like, isn't as time pressured as verbal reasoning. So, what I kind of recommend is do the hardest question types first. And as you kind of go through it and the time pressure builds up, do the easier ones later. Because for this, I was trying to get as high as possible compared to verbal reasoning, where I'm just trying to get like above 650, above 700. So what that usually meant was me starting with logic puzzles because I struggled with those the most, and then move on to these. So yes, no questions, and then move on to like evaluating arguments, probability questions, Venn diagrams, because those questions I found a lot easier because I've seen like basically every variation of them. Then I'd be confident in doing them under the time pressure. So if I've got 5 minutes left and I've got eight Venn diagrams, I'd rather do that than like 4 or 5 logic puzzles in that same amount of time. So the whole point behind this is do the harder questions first. So we're going to go through a variety of them today, but how I would go about this is scan through it, pick out the logic puzzles. And the reason for that is most of the logic puzzles that you see on the day are going to be stuff like this, where you've got a group of people, they've got different things, or you've got a group of people and they're sat in different positions, and it's like Alice sits opposite Blake and Cindy's on the left, or like who has what flavor ice cream. Like most of them are going to be like this, but they can just make up a new style of logic puzzle and just give it to you. So I think my year was the first year where they gave like spatial reasoning, where it's like a star plus a triangle equals a square, and it's like what do two squares add up to or something like that. So the reason I do logic puzzles first is because if I was to see something that I haven't seen before, then I wouldn't be as stuck on it later. But generally, the order that I'd go through it is logic puzzles and then syllogisms and then the easier questions because it'll be quicker to do them on time pressure. But what I kind of recommend everyone that I've tutored is spend like 3 days sticking to that order, and then spend another 3 days maybe swapping one thing with another. So if you find that you've stuck to this order and you can't finish those Venn diagrams, maybe swap Venn diagrams with something earlier on and see how that affects your score. So the whole point is you should have a strict routine when you get into like decision making that maximizes your score, and you can kind of experiment every single day as to like what you should be doing. Okay, so let's start with just this question. So just kind of text on the chat like all five answer options at once. And do all five at once, not just each, because it'll be quite confusing for me to read. Thank you. And also, if you have any questions as to verbal reasoning or decision making, just you can put them in the chat and I'll answer it. Because I think we're probably not going to finish this within an hour. So for that last 30 minutes, we'll just go through QR and SJT as well. So we'll just wait for a few more and then I'll go through it. Yeah, so everyone that's typed it has got it right so far. So it is yes, yes, no, yes, yes. But yeah, so with these questions, the way they're marked, again, if you know this, I'm sorry, but in case you don't know it, with the way they're marked, if you get 5 out of 5, you get 2 marks. If you get 4 out of 5, you get 1 mark. If you get 3 out of 5, you don't get anything. So it does make sense to kind of do them first, because if you're trying to invest a whole 2 minutes into going through these five, then unless you get 2 marks, it's just not worth it. So doing them earlier on does make a lot of sense because if you make like a silly mistake under time pressure later on, then you would have spent maybe 2 minutes to 1 minute 30 or 2 minutes 30 doing this question, and you would only get 1 mark, which is the same as a probability question that would have taken you 20 seconds. So if you are to do these questions and you're confident, then do them near the start where you're not going to make as many silly mistakes. Whereas if you make a silly mistake on a Venn diagram or a probability question, you've dropped a mark, yeah, but you've only spent 20 seconds, so it's not the end of the world. Whereas here, if you make two silly mistakes, you've just wasted 2 minutes. So if you are to answer them, try do them with a clear head and near the start, where you're not like thinking about other questions or you're rushing. So that's kind of why I did logic puzzles first, in case I saw something that I didn't see. But usually it would be those like this person has like strawberry ice cream, so they were fine. But in case there was something that I hadn't seen, then I'd do those first. Otherwise, I'd stick to these in case I kind of messed them up later on. But yeah, so everyone did get it right. The reason the middle one, third one is no is because there's no kind of evidence of they don't really talk about fuel at all, but the others are kind of supported by here. Um, okay, so let's have a go at this question. Yeah, so I think everyone's got this right as well. But essentially a lot of these questions that are like this, you should be trying to get them done really, really quickly. So in terms of tips for that, what I would kind of recommend doing is as soon as you see something like this, draw like a table out. I don't know why it's not focusing, but um draw a table out, okay? If you see a very similar question, but instead they want you to kind of figure out who sits next to who, then if there's four people, you can draw a square. If there's six people, draw like a hexagon. So something like that, where you can just fill in the gaps. Another thing is you don't get marks for kind of understanding the entire table. So what I would kind of recommend you guys to do is once you've kind of figured out like, okay, so this is a logic puzzle, I'm going to draw like a table. Um, have like a skim read of the rules here. So there's one, two, three, four rules, okay? So of these four rules, realistically, you don't need to kind of understand and pick out every single one to answer the question. So what I kind of told myself is get to halfway, and then once you're at halfway, it might be quicker to just go through the answer options than it is to evaluate the tricky rules. So what I mean by that is you'd want to start with something concrete. So something like Blake bought the strawberry ice cream, and then you want to start with like Alice gave the necklace, and then Blake, and Cindy each bought a piece of jewelry. And the reason you want to start with like concrete rules like that is because you can quite literally just put stuff down on the table you've drawn. If you start with something like a person who bought vanilla also bought bracelet. If you even if you have that in your mind, it really hasn't helped you that much. Whereas if you start with a concrete rule and then you move on to the next rule, you can put stuff down. And then the next thing is, let's say, so I think this one was quite easy, but let's say this was a little harder, right? And so sometimes they'll give you a puzzle where you've got multiple different options, like you don't know what the ending is, and you wouldn't be able to tell that the puzzle is ambiguous when you're doing the question, right? So what I kind of told myself is, of these, like let's say there's four rules or five rules, I'd start with the most concrete one, do the next one, and do the next one. So I've built up like maybe half of the puzzle. And most of these questions, realistically, instead of going through like those harder rules, like if there was a harder rule down here, instead of going through that, you can save a lot of time if you just go through the answer options instead. Because usually, like let's say for this, the right answer was B, right? Let's say A and D were definitely like wrong, just based off like the really simple rules. Now you've got two options. You can either go through that hard rule or like those two hard rules that you've left out, or you can just substitute in whatever B is and check whether it matches what they're saying up there. Because it's a lot quicker to kind of check the rules than it is to kind of figure out what the true solution is and then go about finding what the answer is. So if this question was harder, in terms of like an approach, what you should be trying to think of is, okay, so as soon as you see it, is it to do with like arrangement and space, or is it to do with like who has what? So it's who has what. So let me draw a table, and then from that table, I'm going to start with the most concrete rule. Um, yeah, so I'm going to start with the most concrete rule. So something like Blake bought ice cream, Alice gave the necklace, and then move on to this one, and then finish off with this one. And as you're doing this, you should think to yourself, okay, I've done half of this information. Is it going to be quicker for me to finish this and then answer the question? Or is it going to be quicker for me to kind of get rid of the two obvious answers, and then maybe just substitute one and see if it works with these rules? Most of the times, if the question up here is really hard, the method where you're substituting works really quickly. Whereas in this case, because the question itself is quite easy, they've given you basically three concrete rules. It's just easier to finish the puzzle and then answer the question. Um, okay, so we've had a go at this kind of question. We've got okay. We'll do like one of each question style. Um, are you guys comfortable with this? It's just like a comparison question. Do you guys want to have a go at this? So just type it whenever you're ready, because we kind of need to go through this a lot quicker. Yeah, so it's just um it's just like expected probability, right? So 0.85 is 8.85 times 90, and then you have to add up um the 60 times uh where's the oh wait, sorry, the other so it's going to be 0.85 times 90, and then 0.15 times 40 here, I think. But yeah, so these questions, once you get kind of used to them, you'll be able to go through them a lot quicker. So that's why I would recommend doing them later. Because if you make a mistake here, you've spent 30 seconds, you've dropped a mark, it's not the end of the world. Whereas if you make a mistake here, you've wasted another minute that you could have spent elsewhere. Okay. Um, do you want me to go through these questions as well? So do you guys want to have a go at this question? Okay, yeah. So just type it whenever you're ready. Okay, yeah. So the right answer is 11. I think everyone got that right. So we'll continue. Uh, so so have a go at this question style as well. So evaluating arguments. If you get quite confident in this, you should try and get them done as soon as possible, like 20 seconds. Okay, yeah. A lot of you guys are saying D. I think the right answer is D as well. So my kind of approach for these questions, usually I'd save them for the very end, because even if like realistically, it doesn't make a lot of sense for me to spend a lot of time thinking about what the right answer is. Um, and you can get really fast at doing these questions. So if I'm running out of time and I need to get marks, then I'd probably do these near the end. But make sure you get them done because they're basically free marks once you get confident in them. So what I kind of my approach was is I'd pick out what the action and the outcome is. So what's the action? This, and what's the outcome? Um, I mean, like there is no outcome, but um, that's what you pick out. But usually there would be an action and an outcome. So something like, should you stop plastic bottles to reduce global warming or something like that? So there will be an action and an outcome. So in this case, there's no real apparent outcome, but that's what you should pick out from here. So as soon as you've done that, you realize, okay, it's an evaluating argument. I'm going to pick out the action, the outcome. The first thing I'd do is start with the no's because it's a lot easier to evaluate no options than it is to evaluate yeses. So for no's, what I look for is basically the perfect no. So the perfect no would say no. It should offer an explanation as to why it's wrong, and then it should also give you a solution. So if you've got all three of them, then basically in 99% of cases, that is the right answer. I just click it and move on. I wouldn't even like bother reading the yeses, but that was quite rare. So usually there would be like one no that's really good and one no that's kind of bad. So in this case, no, and they're gonna explain why this assumption isn't kind of true. But they don't really give you a solution. So that doesn't mean this isn't the right answer. It's still a really strong answer. But if they were to give you a solution, then it would be the perfect answer. I think because there is no action, so it doesn't say should they reintroduce capital punishment in order to reduce the crime rate. Because there is no outcome in the question, you can't really expect a solution either way. So they're not going to give you a solution to achieving an outcome that doesn't exist. So this is a really good answer. Realistically, on the day of the exam, I just click this and move on. I doubt I'd read these. But let's say this didn't exist, right? So I've gone through no and I can't find a no with an explanation as to why the proposed action won't reach the outcome and a solution to an alternative action that reaches the outcome. If I can't find that, then that's when I look at the yeses. And with the yeses, I just go through them systematically. So the acronym that I used was SAFE. So S for specific, A for assumptions, F for facts, and E for kind of an explanation. So most of the case, in most cases, the best yes will be really specific to whatever is here. So it will offer like a middle step between the action and the outcome. Like it will give you a stat where it explains why doing this will bring about the outcome. But yeah, so usually the approach was pick out action outcome, look for the perfect no, so which is no with an explanation and a solution. If I can't find that, then look at the yeses and go through the acronym SAFE. Again, you can go on YouTube, you can find different approaches, but what I kind of recommend is since you've heard this, spend like 3 to 4 days purely sticking to this, and then spend the next 3 to 4 days maybe changing something up or going on YouTube and finding a different approach. And then you're going to kind of build up your own mental image of like, okay, so I've seen questions like this before. the fastest way to answer is this approach, or the fastest way to answer is a different approach I saw online. Okay. Um, uh, so we've done logic puzzles, we've done these kinds of maths questions, uh, and syllogisms, and Venn diagrams. Uh, I think this is similar to a logic puzzle, to be fair. Do you guys want to have a go at this? Yeah, actually, I don't think this is quite straightforward. Okay, so it quite literally says from 100 creatures, 99 can do above 10. So how many creatures are less than 10? It's just going to be 100 minus 99. I think all of this is just a distractor. Um, let's go through a different question style. Okay, how about this? So this is something you probably wouldn't see on the UCAT that often. So does anyone have an answer? I low-key don't know how to do this question. Can you explain how you got C? I don't think I've seen anything like this in the UCAT. This is more similar to BMAT and using nets. Um, okay, I don't really get it, but if you guys want to kind of use ChatGPT after this is over, um, you can kind of see an answer to this. But again, if they throw something like this at you, where it's a logic puzzle that you haven't seen before, try do it near the start. Um, to kind of because it'll be a lot easier on you if you think to yourself like, okay, I haven't seen this, let me do this near the start, rather than you having like 10 or 5 minutes left and you have to go through a question style that you haven't seen before. That's going to create a lot of stress and it's going to impact your QR later and your SJT later as well. So if there's something that you're kind of not confident with, especially for DM, since you're trying to go for near 800 or 900, do those harder, challenging ones near the start so you can go through the easier questions under time pressure. But that is like that's kind of assuming that you've practiced those easy questions religiously. So you kind of know exactly what you're doing as soon as you see a Venn diagram or an evaluating arguments, so that you're not dropping those easy marks as well. Okay, I think this is QR now. Does it? Yeah, I think it's moved on to QR. But with QR, there's no like strict um approach to QR. It's more to do with on the day. Um, that question, so you should be able to kind of tell, like, is this question going to take me longer or less, shorter than like the average QR question is expected to like take. So something like this, right? What I would think is so this kind of decision it should be based off like how you find QR. So there's no like algorithm or something like that that you can just f follow. So you know which questions to attempt and which ones to not. But for me, when I was doing my prep and with Medify, the questions that I didn't like doing were oh okay. Let me see if I can relog in. But yeah, so the questions that I didn't like doing were like huge tables or anything where I'm kind of forced to use my calculator. Um, oh, okay, it works again. Okay, I'll just share my screen. Can you guys see that okay? Yeah, yeah. So anytime I saw like a huge table or um, like a huge graph where the difficulty comes from kind of going through a lot of that data instead of actually thinking about the actual maths behind it, I usually wouldn't do those. So I'd save those for later and see um, because there will be certain questions where, uh, like if you just use maths, you're going to get the right answer. But if you did that, you're not going to kind of finish the entire test on time. So whenever you're kind of doing what's really important is, so what I did was I had like a notebook. And on that notebook, if I got a question, like even if I got it right, but I saw like it took me longer than it should have, then what I'd do is just like I'd go on Medify, see what the explanation is, and see if there's any redundant steps, or ask ChatGPT like, is there a quicker way for me to go about this question? And just go online and see like are there like mental math strats that you can use. So one thing that I did wrong in my prep was so what I did was 6 weeks of preparation for the UCAT. And what I kind of believed was if I get really fast at using the on-screen calculator, using the keypad on the right-hand side, then I should be able to kind of get through all these questions really quick and I'll like just be faster at answering these questions. But every single time you use the calculator or you use like the whiteboard, you'll basically just if you think if I'm using the calculator, I've just kind of taken a question away from myself. Because in the long run, what happens is you can only get so fast at using the calculator and your whiteboard, but with your mental maths, there's no limit to how fast you can think about these questions, right? So it's better to train your mental math skills from the start than it is to get really proficient at using the calculator or writing down stuff on your whiteboard. And if I kind of realized that earlier, it would have made my life easier as well. So for QR, what I used to do was this was only in the last 2 weeks of my prep when I figured it out, but I used to like maybe do 20 questions at a time. And I'd force myself not to write anything down or use that on-screen calculator. And the whole point of that is it isn't to kind of like just kind of torture myself by doing like complex maths. Like the whole point is realistically, it doesn't matter like what score I get. I'm just trying to force myself to think of like an alternative solution. So, what I mean by that is like, let's say you had to do like a calculation, right? It's 48 times 57. So instead of working all of that out, if I just saw, okay, so 48 times 57, let me just look at the last number, 8 times 7, so that's 56. So it has to end in a 6. I just click that. Or if I see like just looking at the size of the result. So just by looking at what the calculation is, instead of calculating it, like what size is the answer going to be? And from there, can I just click something and move on? So that was the whole point of forcing myself not to use a calculator or the whiteboard. So you can kind of think of um, not like the pure maths, but think of a faster approach to the same question that allows you to skip a lot of the steps. Because it's not like you don't have any answer options here, right? You should try and use these to your advantage because they can give you a lot of clues. I think in the actual day of the UCAT, like every single answer option that they give you, they're not just going to be like random numbers that they fill up to just put like, let's say the answer for this one is C, right? Um, Sorry. So the answer for the cylinder question, I'll go through that. Uh, 0.04. So it's just using the formula. But what was I talking about? Yeah, so the whole point of this is try think to yourself like, do I need to do the maths or is there a quicker way to do it? You can obviously use ChatGPT to help, like ask ChatGPT, like, I've got this question. It takes me like 90 seconds to do it. Are there any redundant steps? How did you work on interpreting data? Graph, multiple axes and lines. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, if you get some huge graph or huge table, like realistically, everyone that's going to sit the exam is going to slow down on that question and spend a lot of time on it. The whole point is like, you're trying to maximize as many marks as you can. So if you can do like, instead of spending 2 minutes on that, if you can spend that exact same time on a question like this, where you don't need to kind of sort through a lot of information, all you need to do is read and kind of get to answering the question straight away your score will just be higher because you've done more questions. So obviously it's kind of obviously when you're doing your practice as well, get used to sorting through all this data so that on the day of the exam, if you do get unlucky and you get like a huge table question, you're not too flustered by it. But when it does come to the exam, you should think to yourself like, so I'm weakest on these questions, let me do what I'm strongest on instead. But yeah, do you guys want to have a go at how about this actually? Okay, so I'll just have this open. If you guys can just look at the questions on your screen, because it's going to be hard for me to scroll down. And if you have any other questions on what I've gone through today, just put them in the chat, I'll answer them. Mm. Yeah, so it is B. So again, one thing you can do to kind of save a little bit of time here is realistically, for this, like you're gonna have to probably use your calculator to answer the question because you're working out a mean. But what you should do is instead of just working it out and then looking, if you look at the answer options, you can see to what extent you can kind of get away with estimating. So if these answer options were like off by a factor of like and not by a factor, but like let's say this was 57 and this was 79 and this was 90, then you can kind of just look at it and just say, okay, so instead of me doing 86.06, let me just do 86 and 80 and 80 and 80, and then that will give you a faster way of doing it in your head than using the calculator. But since each answer option is quite like specific and they are also quite close to each other, you would have had to use your calculator for this. And again, sometimes you can kind of get away with not using the calculator if you see something like that. Okay, how many shares did the investor buy? So just type it in the chat whenever you're ready. Do you guys want me to go through this or because there's no one really using the chat? Okay, yeah. So it says up here that he spent 5.6K in pounds, and this was 90 days ago. So on the x-axis it says days since the investment. So the question wants you to figure out how many shares he bought. So first, like if they've given you the exchange rate, then realistically there's probably some kind of exchange rate calculation going on. So the value here is in dollars, but you know it's in pounds. So it's going to be whatever that is, 5.6K divided by 0.75. So you can get that number in dollars, which is, I think I got like 7.8K or something like that. And then if you know that he's invested 7.8K dollars and you know each share is worth $86 at the point where he invested, then what you kind of have to do from there is his total investment divided by the share price of each share. And then from there, you can see how many shares he owns. So it was like 7,800-ish divided by 86, which was 87. And again, if you look at like the difference between the answer options here, you've got a lot more leeway as to this. So for this, you probably had to kind of type in everything on your calculator to get this answer option. Whereas to differentiate whether it's 72 or 87, you don't really need to write down the 0.42 and like worry about the 0.06. So if you can just literally spend 1 second just looking at what the answer options are before you just jump into the calculation, as you're doing that calculation, your brain's going to think like, do I need to do all this? And you're going to save a lot of time on each question. So, I mean, not a lot of time, but it's a little bit, which adds up to a lot over the entire mock. Um, does that make sense? Or the question as well? So, do you guys want to have a go at 44 and 45? So again, just type it in the chat whenever um you've got an answer, like anyone. Okay, yeah. So the answer is C. It's just how much has it changed by over the 90 days. So from here to uh there, I think. Does it say? Yeah, I think the answer is C. Okay, the last one, if he had bought 50 shares, how much would he have lost? Again, you can use what you've worked out up here to use that. So what's the average rate of change in stock price over the 90-day period? So the whole point is they will need to figure out how much it's changed by each day. So over the 90 days, it's gone from 86.6, 0.06 to 77.39, right? So work out the actual change. So if you obviously with a calculator work out like the decimals, but it's changed by like nine-ish, and then divide that by 90. So 9 over 90 is 0.01. Um, and then the closest one to that is probably C. So I think it is I think it is C. Okay, and anyways, for this question, if he had bought 50 shares, how much of the value, how much would he have lost? If you've got how much the stock price has dropped per day, um, you can kind of use that as well as um, like how much he bought and see how much he loses over the 90 days. Actually, you don't even need to use the information here. Does anyone have an answer? Do you guys want me to go through this as well? Or okay, yeah. So he's bought. Let's assume he's bought 50 shares. We need to figure out how much he's lost, right? So he bought it here when it was A6, and now it's at 77. So each share has dropped by um, whatever that difference is. So eight, nine-ish dollars. So if he's bought 50, then he's lost 50 times that. So it's going to be this difference times by 50. So that difference is 86 minus um, so you can just do on your calculator, but 77.39. So each share dropped off by 8.67 dollars, and he spent 50. I mean, he's bought 50 shares, so he's lost 50 times that, which is $400. And they don't give you an answer in pounds. They could have done that and expected one more calculation. But yeah, okay. We've only got a couple minutes left. Um, do you guys have any questions as to like anything we've been through today, or just generally about the UCAT, or how to prepare, or just anything in general? So it kind of depends on um yeah, so it depends on what question it is. So let's say, for example, it's verbal reasoning, right? So my approach for verbal reasoning was I wouldn't like I never expected to finish all 44 questions. Realistically, in my first run through, if I did 6 passages, that's great. In my second run through, if I did 3 passages, that's great. And in my last run through, I just guess whatever was left over. So if everything went to plan, I would attempt 9 of the 11 passages and I'd have to guess 8 questions. So for those questions and those first two run-throughs that I genuinely spent like the 2 minutes or the 3 minutes to go through the passage, if I get something wrong there, then I'd reflect on that. So what I would do is like, why have I gone it wrong? So I think when I started, 1 second. Uh, okay, let me share my screen again. So what I started for verbal reasoning, I did this for QR, decision making, and everything as well. So I just started um, something like this. So if I get something genuinely wrong, um, I'd go through, write it down. So later on, I wouldn't get it wrong again. So if I spent 2 minutes, I saw a question, I was like, okay, I'm confident this is the right answer, and I get it wrong. Then I write down like, okay, in the future, if I see two claims being made back to back, watch out for that. Or if it's like, if Usain Bolt came first and he finished at 9.58, just because someone else got 9.6 doesn't mean they're second. They could be third as well. But yeah, so making like so if you write down exactly why, let's say you've spent the 2 minutes on that passage, but you still like fall for a trap, whether that's here or decision making. For QR, it was easier to do on pen and paper, so I don't have like a document like this. But the whole point is yeah, it should be kind of based off of what you get wrong. Um, Is it better to start practicing harder sections first? Yeah, so when you are practicing, do those questions that you don't want to do. So for verbal reasoning, make sure you're doing as many of those like hard reading comprehension questions. For decision making, if you don't like certain question styles, do those. But on the day of the exam, you should play to your strengths. So do the ones that you consistently get right on Medify, and you know you've gotten those marks right. Okay. Are there any other questions or?